confirm another church fire overnight in western Norway.
Some things you're about to see and hear might be too graphic for children.
Let's be honest, Varg at that point was basically just taunting the fact that they did this and got away with it.
Authorities are urging the public to remain calm as the investigation continues.
Too much ego. I think he just wanted to prove somehow that he is somebody too, you know, and that went to his head too much.
In the early 1990s, Norway had a reputation most countries could only dream of. Crime was extremely low. People trusted their government, didn't fear their neighbors, and generally believed the system worked. But under that calm Nordic postcard, something strange was quietly starting to grow. The people involved were mostly teenagers and young adults who spent their time trading tapes, forming bands, and trying to make the darkest, most aggressive music they could imagine. One of the bands at the center of this emerging underground scene was Mayhem. Formed in the mid-1980s by guitarist Euronymous, whose real name was, and please forgive my pronunciation, Øystein Aarseth, alongside bassist Necro Butcher and drummer Hellhammer. They wanted to create music that sounded violent, ugly, and completely hostile to the clean, polite society around them. Because, from their perspective, Norway's perfect society felt like living inside a hospital waiting room, and if the environment around them was so sedated and obedient, then their music would be the exact opposite. These kids had grown up listening to metal bands like Venom, Bathory, and Celtic Frost, artists who had already begun pushing heavy metal toward darker and more aggressive sounds. But they wanted to push the sound even further. They craved music that was more brutal than what most metal fans would have been used to. To help them create their sound, they recruited a Swedish vocalist known as Dead, whose real name was, and again, you've got to forgive my pronunciation, Per-Yngve Olin. The guitars were pushed to the edge of distortion, creating a thin, jagged sound that almost felt unstable. The vocals abandoned traditional singing completely and sounded more like desperate screams.
There didn't sound like people singing, it sounded like a monster singing.
The kind of sound that made casual listeners immediately turn it off. Their early demos circulated through the International Tape Trading Network, a strange pre-internet system where fans would copy cassette recordings and mail them to each other across borders. This network connected isolated metal scenes across Europe and beyond. A band could record a demo in Norway, and within months, copies might be circulating in Italy, Germany, Poland, or Brazil. Mayhem slowly began building a reputation for their extreme sound. Over time, this extreme sound would come to be known as Norwegian black metal.
The original bands didn't have so much money to produce good recordings, so the music came from their hearts. The Norwegian black metal was something to shock people with their extreme music.
People around him often described Dead as quiet, withdrawn, and socially distant.
That was
a thinker, and he was quite as a person.
In many ways, he seemed fragile and deeply depressed.
He was different in all ways. I was fascinated by his stories about, he had some visions about an afterlife, and I think most of his lyrics are also based on those visions.
A young man who carried a heavy darkness and mental issues even before he discovered metal.
That struggled with depression and mental problems.
He was also obsessed with death and decay to a degree that went far beyond theatrical stage performance and unsettled even the people around him. He often buried his clothes in the ground so they would smell like decay when he wore them. And according to several musicians in the scene, he collected dead animals and kept them in plastic bags. He would often carry one of these bags with him and inhale the smell before going on stage, believing it helped him enter the atmosphere he wanted to create.
His dedication for the project was completely beyond anything. It was everything. You have a job or you're in a band, but you have other things on the side that interest you. He didn't have that. Everything that he was into had something to do with Mayhem, and his stage persona then.
And in 1991, his fascination with death became horrifyingly real, as this young man tragically took his own life at just 22 using a shotgun. Euronymous was the one who discovered the body, and he reportedly waited before calling the police and instead went out of his way to drive to a store, buy a disposable camera, come back to the scene, and stage some pictures.
One of my best friends killed himself. And as I'm trying to cope with this, Euronymous tells me that he has taken photos.
One of those images circulated through the underground tape trading world, and years later appeared on the cover of a notorious Mayhem bootleg called Dawn of the Black Hearts, released without the band's approval. Allegedly, he also collected fragments of his friend's skull and later mailed them to a few musicians he believed were true members of the Norwegian black metal scene.
And this also was confirmed by Morgan from Marduk in 2012. Even if it seems like that from people that I talk with that are close to Morgan, he got rid of it. I think for the respect of the family. But of course, don't call me on that. I don't really know the details.
Whether viewed as a tragic situation all around or something far darker, the movement was now entering a dangerous area. The idea that the music had crossed a line between performance and reality had magnified Norwegian black metal's reputation, and Mayhem in particular was seen as something genuinely dangerous. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Necrobutcher decided to leave Mayhem.
Because we had a different reaction on what happened. He almost felt like he was happy about it, while I was down with grief completely. Was crying and stuff, for years. And he didn't give me any room to grieve. I was very mad at him.
Meanwhile, Euronymous seemed determined to use Mayhem's growing mythology to advance his own reputation. Later that year, he opened a small record shop in Oslo called Helvete, which meant hell in Norwegian. At first glance, it was just a tiny music store tucked away in the city, but for the black metal movement, this place was actually something much bigger. Because back then, if you lived in Norway and liked metal, this was basically the only place to go to find rare records or connect with other like-minded individuals looking to form a band. And so inevitably, this little music shop became, in many ways, the unofficial headquarters of Norwegian black metal.
Helvete var en skivaffär och en viktig samlingsplats tidigt på 1990-talet. när norsk black metal började växa fram.
At the same time, Euronymous also launched a record label called Death Like Silence Productions, which began releasing music from the emerging black metal underground. In short, in a country with only a handful of extreme metal bands, that meant much of the growing scene now revolved around one music store, one label, and one personality. Euronymous suddenly found himself being the glue that kept the entire movement together. He was a pioneer of the genre, a label owner, a distributor, and a self-appointed authority on what black metal should be. If you were part of the scene, you eventually had to make business with him.
The Euronymous at that time kind of manager, but it was not really a manager, a guy who helped us to fucking do public relations, you know.
And right in the middle of this environment, a new figure slowly began attracting attention. His name was Varg Vikernes. He grew up in the woods in western Norway, something that initially made him a bit of an outsider. Much of his time was spent alone, reading fantasy literature and diving into stories about ancient Norse mythology. And then he briefly played in a death metal band called Old Funeral. It was a small underground group, but it gave him his first real connection to Norway's extreme metal community and gave him a sense of purpose and belonging.
But he was a rich kid, bro.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was not like the others.
Yeah.
He was like, when I was at his place, you know, he had this beautiful, like nice flat in Bergen, like looking on the fjords, the balcony, all the instruments, fucking loaded.
So he had it kind of easy.
Yeah. To think about it. Not like Euronymous or the rest.
Yeah.
Everybody was like
poor.
fucking, like us, you know.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he was like having this nice shit, you know, like having a dishwasher and shit. I never even seen it before that, you know. For us, it was like, what the fuck, you know. I was like, you know, like stuff like, it was like pretty nice.
Varg was younger than many of the other figures in the scene, but he shared the same feeling that had drawn many of them toward black metal in the first place. He didn't feel like he belonged to the orderly and obedient society around him, and started cultivating a growing hostility toward Christianity, a resentment that would soon become a defining part of his identity.
The Christianity is the root to all problems in the modern world.
In the early 1990s, he began recording demos under the name Burzum, a name borrowed from the fictional language created by Tolkien that roughly translated to darkness.
He was into like black metal, he was into like Tolkien.
Yeah.
Completely into Tolkien. He was like a younger dude, so, you know, when we are in the early 20s, he seemed to be younger because he was like 2 years younger than me. Today it doesn't matter, but that time it's different, you know. So he was the young kid in the band, but he was super intelligent, very good English, not like mine, you know. It was like pretty good.
Unlike most bands in the scene, Burzum was essentially Varg alone, writing and recording the music himself.
Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids. It's been associated with satanic worship, suicide, and animal sacrifice. But is death metal music just hype or something that could actually hurt your kids?
Interestingly, in a scene where satanic imagery was often used as provocation or stage aesthetics, Varg stood out for a different reason. While he never claimed to be a Satanist, he sincerely despised Christianity because he believed it had wiped out the original spiritual traditions of Scandinavia.
We are not Christian. Christianity is a Jewish religion. Everybody can relate to Odin and Thor and Freya in Norway because it's our religion.
Like pretty much anyone involved in the scene, Varg eventually had to discuss business with Euronymous.
I told him that I had a demo tape. He asked me to send it to him. I did, and he wanted to release it on his label.
Eventually, the two formed some sort of a friendship, and Euronymous began releasing Burzum records through his label. But beneath the surface, the dynamic between the two was doomed to fail.
When he asked me to help him fund the production of the album, all the warning lights should have come on, right? But I was young, I was naive, and I had just, acquired a deal with a record company.
Euronymous believed he had helped build Norwegian black metal from the ground up, and many respected him as one of the central architects of the movement. But Varg saw himself as some sort of a black metal prodigy who could take the genre to a new, more extreme level.
But I think it was just like two young kids, like too much ego. I think he just wanted to prove somehow that he is somebody too, and that went to his head too much, and that's how they fucking end up in this complete fucking bullshit.
Around them, stories started circulating in the media about vandalism and desecration targeting historic churches across Norway. At first, no one seemed entirely sure who was responsible. Some people assumed it was just stupid teenage vandalism, a few bored kids trying to scare the public and get attention. No one realized it then, but inside the Norwegian black metal movement, things had started to escalate to absurd levels. When news started circulating about acts of vandalism targeting churches across the country, they initially seemed almost too insane to be real. Because Norway's wooden churches had become historic landmarks. I mean, when you think about it, these wooden cathedrals had peacefully survived for entire centuries, becoming iconic symbols of Norway's past. So, the idea that someone would deliberately destroy them felt unthinkable. And yet, these reports continued to increase. In the early hours of June 6, 1992, a fire destroyed the Fantoft Stave Church. Originally built in the 12th century, this church was one of the most famous examples of Norway's traditional stave architecture. Known for its tall wooden towers and intricate carvings that had survived centuries of history. But all of a sudden, all that was left of the building was a black skeleton of burned beams. Police quickly concluded that the church had been deliberately set on fire, but they had no suspects and no clear motive. Over the next year, several more churches across Norway were damaged or destroyed, and each new incident intensified public alarm. Inside the black metal scene, however, the fires were interpreted very differently because hostility toward Christianity had been associated with the genre for years. Often it appeared as theatrical Satanism, used by bands mainly to provoke and shock the society around them. But as I said earlier, Varg sincerely hated Christianity. In 1993, he released a Burzum EP titled Asker. The title means ashes in Norwegian, and the cover featured a photograph of the burned ruins of the Fantoft Stave Church. Early versions of this album reportedly even included a lighter inside the case, a small detail that reinforced Varg's reputation as one of the movement's most radical figures.
In the first press LPs that, if anyone ever bought them back when they were released in 1993, not only do you get the album artwork of the Fantoft Church being burned in these ruins, but it would also come with a Zippo lighter. Which, let's be honest, Varg at that point, along with the label Death Like Silence, was basically just taunting the fact that they did this and got away with it.
In interviews with underground magazines, and eventually with mainstream journalists, Varg admitted that from his point of view, the burning of churches represented a symbolic retaliation against an oppressive institution that had erased the region's core traditions. These statements quickly attracted the attention of the public and triggered a major police investigation into the black metal scene.
all genres, all music genres grow when there's controversy involved.
Suddenly, what had once been an obscure underground movement was appearing on national news. Some media outlets even described Euronymous' music store as a fake operation where some secret satanic cult would meet to plan increasingly violent actions.
And the whole purpose of the interview had been to promote his shop. And my motivation was, of course, to help him get the business going so that he could print more records. And his response was to close the shop because he got too much uncomfortable attention.
So that was the time, right at the time when the churches were burning in Norway, and they called it the Black Circle, which never kind of existed, kind of like satanic underground. There was a lot of, it was in the news that there's this crazy bunch of people looking like penguins and burning out churches.
For more context, we should also go back a little and mention that in 1992, Faust, the drummer for the metal band Emperor, murdered a man in the city of Lillehammer. Apparently, this man had approached Faust and tried to flirt with him, something that, according to his later confession, pissed him off. So Faust agreed to walk with this man into a nearby forest, only to suddenly attack him with a knife and leave him dead at the scene.
There's a lot of speculation that there's a lot of gay hatred in the black metal scene.
For a while, the murder remained unsolved, and Faust continued performing with Emperor without the public knowing what had happened. But when the truth eventually came out, it further intensified the sense that black metal bands were a threat to society. Meanwhile, police investigations into the church burnings intensified, and several musicians quietly came under suspicion. And inside the scene itself, tensions started rising. Apparently, Euronymous and Varg had also started arguing about money.
Varg always had bad blood with Euronymous from the start, considering he always thought Euronymous sucked at being a businessman. He owed Varg a lot of money for all the albums that people were buying up at his shop.
Varg later said that he had started to fear Euronymous might be planning to harm him. He believed Euronymous was jealous of the attention Varg was receiving from metal fans and the media. Whether those suspicions were real or exaggerated, the relationship between the two men quickly turned into paranoia and distrust. In a strange twist, however, Varg had begun collaborating even more directly with Mayhem during this period.
Nobody wanted, to have anything to do with Euronymous, etc., but you ended up playing in Mayhem then. You were their bassist.
As the band prepared to record a new album, he contributed bass tracks for what would become De Mysteriis Dom Satanas, alongside guitarist Euronymous, drummer Hellhammer, and new vocalist Attila. But by the time the record finally came out, the relationship between Euronymous and Varg would have already collapsed in the most violent way imaginable. By the summer of 1993, the relationship between Euronymous and Varg had deteriorated into open hostility. Both were central figures in the Norwegian black metal scene, and each believed to be the one best positioned to shape its future. For a time, Euronymous had held the upper hand through the record store and his label, but once he closed his shop and as Varg's notoriety grew, the balance of influence between them began to shift. Years later, Varg would claim that he had begun to fear Euronymous, believing that the rivalry between them had become so intense that Euronymous might even be planning to take him out.
He was plotting against me.
He said that Euronymous started to spread his voice that he wanted to kidnap Varg, bring him in a forest, torture him and film everything.
Whether those fears were genuine or exaggerated remains disputed, but they would later become the central part of Varg's explanation for the events that happened next. In August of 1993, Varg took a long drive from Bergen, where he lived, to Oslo. Traveling with him was Snorre Ruch, a guitarist associated with the band Thorns. The trip took several hours. By the time they reached Oslo, in the early hours of August 10th, the city was still asleep. Their destination was Euronymous' apartment.
But we can have an idea from here where he lived. It's one of those apartments up here, or maybe one of the ones down there.
Accounts of what happened next differ depending on who is telling the story. What is clear is that a confrontation between Euronymous and Varg quickly escalated into violence inside the apartment. At some point during their confrontation, Varg pulled out a knife and attacked Euronymous multiple times. Euronymous tried to escape and eventually died in the staircase of the building. At the time, he was 25 years old.
Yeah, there's multiple buildings with multiple doors. It makes me think like how it's possible that with all the chaos that you could have heard at the time, people didn't, I don't know, call the police immediately or just went directly out, because must have heard something, right?
I trappeoppgangen mellom første og annen etasje. Han ble funnet av en nabo klokken 5 I dag morges. 25-åringen.
Within days, the story spread across newspapers and television broadcasts. What had once been an underground rivalry inside the black metal scene had now turned into a murder investigation. One of the movement's central figures was dead, and only a few days later, police arrested Varg. As investigators dug deeper, they began uncovering connections between Varg and several of the church fires that had spread fear across Norway. The case went to trial in 1994 and quickly became one of the most widely covered criminal cases in modern Norwegian history. In the end, Varg was found guilty of murder and multiple counts of arson, and sentenced to the maximum penalty allowed under Norwegian law, 21 years in prison. Snorre Ruch, who was with him the night of the killing, received an 8-year sentence. In 1994, Mayhem finally released the De Mysterious album, a record that would go on to become one of the most influential releases in black metal history.
This isn't an easy album to listen to, and in fact, it wouldn't even be the album that you would recommend to a black metal newcomer despite its influence. But this album, with all its grim wizardry and brilliance, is likely the pinnacle of black metal's history, and it deserves its place among metal's most influential albums.
But now, Euronymous was dead, Varg was serving a prison sentence, and the whole movement was under intense criticism from the media and the general public. In a strange and unsettling irony, the album itself preserved the sound of Euronymous and Varg playing together, even though the relationship between them had ended horribly. Several years later, Mayhem reformed, released new music, and continues performing to this day. As for Varg, he was released on parole in 2009 after serving roughly 16 years of his sentence. He continued recording music under the Burzum name and maintained an online presence where he promoted extreme nationalist and far-right ideas, views that attracted significant criticism and renewed controversy around his name. But those developments belong to a much later chapter of his story.
He's a very controversial individual, not just because of all the things he did in Norway when he was a part of the black metal scene, but now all the political activism and all the things he did when he had a YouTube channel that he said throughout the decade.
Today, the origins of Norwegian black metal still fascinate people around the world. But the small group of musicians who created it will always be remembered also for the fires, the violence, and the murder that turned an underground music scene into one of the darkest chapters in modern music history.